This is You the People. Each week, us three Canadians talk about you, the people, your politics, your conventions, your political systems, and yes, your upcoming election. And with me, as always, Corey Hogan and Stephen Carter. Guys, what's up?
Well, we're up late. We're up. That's what's up right now.
Yeah. This is a feat for you, especially for you, Stephen.
I'm quite advanced in my years. This is something.
I mean, you're a man of routine. Swiss chalet at 5, bed by 6. So this is
They
a
make
little different.
Great sauce. I'm not sure. God.
It's a very Canadian thing to say to our U.S. listeners, just to let you know. We're already off to a great start. Corey, do you want to tell America what Swiss chalet is?
It's a rotisserie chicken restaurant that's often attached to a Harvey's.
Corey,
that's helpful.
Do you want to tell them what a Harvey's is?
No, I don't.
Yeah, come to Canada when the border opens.
Yeah. Please come to Canada when the border opens. We are, of course, here because of the convention. We want to talk about all things convention. But first, let's get into the headlines. Are you guys ready? Our first headline from Forbes. Will Trump accept election results? He'll decide in the aftermath, says his press secretary. Wow. I mean, does that actually surprise us at all? Like, Corey, your glasses are off, which means that you're probably about to say something. Jump in there.
It doesn't surprise me at all. It's just this continued normalization of this messaging from Trump. He says it all the time now. It was shocking when he said it months ago, but now we're just almost used to it. I'm surprised it's even a headline. Donald Trump saying that he may not accept the election results has become conventional political conversation. And that's flat out nuts. The idea that we all sort of walk around our lives talking about basically anything else is a bit remarkable. I mean, this is scary, scary stuff that Donald Trump has been so cavalier about, maybe not accepting the democratic results of an election.
Yeah. I mean, listen, he's been touting this for a while. It's quite the response from his press secretary. Carter, what do you think?
Well, I think the people we've come to take for granted that we change parties in power after an election, whether it's the United States or Canada or Great Britain, any of the great democracies in the world. This transfer of power without military intervention is not actually a normal thing. It is abnormal, and it takes the work of everybody that's involved in the process for it to actually work. Because as soon as one person walks away from it, one person says that they're no longer going to be respect this tradition, it puts all of the institutions of the country on high alert. And the institutions of the country, especially when you're dealing with the United States, where the primary institution is the military. The military is the strongest in the U.S. over anywhere else in the world. And the fact that they haven't been involved in a coup is actually remarkable. So seeing the president of the United States play with these institutions and play with this tradition and so openly is just absolutely, it leaves me gobsmacked.
Carter's summation is that it's high time. Corey, what do you think?
Well, God, no. People tell themselves this fairy tale about how democracies die, right? And it's this notion that all of a sudden there's this tyrant who shows up, declares they're a tyrant, and ends elections like that. It doesn't happen like that. It happens when somebody in the democratic process starts to call into question the democratic process and says, I represent the people. I represent the voice of the people better than this broken system. You can't trust this broken system. You can only trust me. I am the embodiment of the public will, like of public opinion. And Donald Trump is not just steering close to this. This is basically where he's going at this point, right? Like if I lose the election, it's because the election is crooked because I'm the good guy, right? That's what he's saying at this point.
Okay, our next headline from CBS. Guys, this is perhaps the best headline that, as someone on Twitter said, the writers of 2020 have given us. Steve Bannon was taken into custody today by U.S. Postal Service agents, expected to be arraigned before a U.S. magistrate. alleging that he has had a role in defunding donors as part of an online crowdfunding campaign known as We Build the Wall. I don't even know. Okay, where do you want to start? I mean, like many of the headlines on this show, there's so many focal points here. Carter, you're at it. Go ahead.
If you don't start with it came from U.S. Postal Service inspectors, I mean or investigators, that's what makes it art. Like that the U.S. Postal Service is taking down Steve Bannon for this alleged wire fraud and money laundering. That's what makes it genius. Whoever's writing this is writing it just perfectly. There's all these callbacks and flips. This is perfect. This is good comedy, Zain. You love comedy. This is good comedy.
Yeah. 2020 has been directed as a perfectly circular joke, like a Curb Your Enthusiasm episode. Corey, what do you think?
Curb Your Enthusiasm or Arrested Development. He was even arrested on a boat. So I guess that means the U.S. Postal Service police have boats.
Oh my
God.
God.
Boats now? You know, I mean, like it's crazy. It's a lot of fun, because he's a real bastard and I'm glad he's going to jail. But also like money to build a wall that has not been built. I can't.
Yeah, they collected millions of dollars for this, right? They've collected millions of dollars from, it's kind of like what we discussed last week it's like he's taking exactly what Trump is doing on his campaign and saying, let me just do that, except with people to donate to this wall.
Well, this is what's interesting. As we talked about last week, I mean, in any other circumstance, what Trump is doing is fraud. And this is the other circumstance. Steve Bannon is actually doing it. It's fabulous. I mean, we literally said this last week. Any other circumstance, this person goes to jail. And here we are. And it's Bannon and it's Schilling. And I'm so excited. I can't even begin to tell you.
And that brings me to my next headline. Thanks for scooping us, Carter. Also from CBS, a few hours later, ex-Red Sox pitcher Curt Schilling has been arrested in connection with the alleged involvement with Steve Bannon's fraudulent scheme. Now, of course, we remember Curt Schilling for the bloody socks that he had in that World Series game. But now, of course, we're going to remember him for his absolute shit reputation that he carries forward. Now being arrested. Corey, any reaction as a Dodgers fan? As a Dodgers fan.
Yeah, as a Dodgers fan. Yeah,
as a Dodgers fan.
That guy.
Okay, cool.
No,
great.
I honestly, I didn't even know that until you mentioned it. That is awesome. That 2020 really continues to just play with our emotions here. This is like the most hack season of life I've ever been involved in.
He, as a Arizona Diamondbacks fan, that guy was the rock that really won us the 2001 World Series. I just want you guys to know that. But I'm glad we tossed him away into the dustbin of history until he's reemerged right now, where he's been arrested for trying to build a wall. Carter, any thoughts?
I mean, Curt Schilling is one of the worst people, and seeing him with Bannon and going down for this, I'm hopeful that the trials proceed very quickly so we can enjoy what is it, Schadenfreude? Is that how we enjoy it, Schadenfreude?
No, not even
it's
close.
not close. No,
that was terrible.
That's not like Yiddish. It's German, but it's
an American audience. We don't have to worry.
Yeah. Okay. Here we go. That's great. They won't know the difference. Corey, do you want to tell them what a Harvey's is at this point? Do we want to provide them any clarity on the Harvey's just before we move on?
You can get full slices of dill pickles. It's great.
Why did you?
That's true. You do get full slices of dill pickles. It's a hamburger restaurant where you get to build your own hamburger. You go there and they make it in front of you, and you get to pick everything that goes on it. It's like Subway meets McDonald's.
No, it's those just America. America's got this Columbusing exercise where they think they've discovered everything first. So it's like Chipotle before Chipotle for burgers. There you go.
Yeah, that's very good.
Fucking people. All right, let's move it on to our first segment. You must have felt that. Guys, I want to talk about the Joe Biden speech, the 4 nights of DNC coverage plastered all over, not just U.S. television, but Canadian television. It's been part of our coverage here, too, despite the political drama going on in our country. But first, before we get into the Biden speech, guys, I want to start with the convention at large. You know, last week we talked about the convention, what to expect. Corey, you had some sage advice around not trying to replicate the format of a convention with 15,000 people in it for now a digital audience. More broadly, I'm kind of curious, what did you guys think of production and content of what you saw over the 3 nights? Carter, maybe I'll start with you.
Well, I think that the production was pretty good. I mean, one of the things that they don't do as well as they could is transitions. So even transitioning from the end of Biden's speech to the fireworks, there could have been a really lovely cover put in on top of that. The applause, him getting applause from other speeches that he's done live. There could have been a number of different ways to fill it. And instead they just kind of filled it with the world's most awkward stage walk where they're waving at the television screens. And those types of transitions existed throughout the production where you'd have like a minute, or not a minute, you'd have 2 or 3 seconds of downtime before the next video started. And those things, they're jarring because we're so used to an actual television production that is put together properly. So I really enjoyed this because, number one, everybody had to stick to their time. Everybody was edited, right? No one screwed up. Live on television. No one was able to take advantage of the live nature to go, 35 seconds longer than they should have, or 3 minutes and 50 seconds longer than they should have. Everybody was tight. But the television production element, the transitions were noticeably challenging. And then I wanted to put my head through the wall on some of the everyman sections. The Biden interviews for randos part was just like, that was so painful. I want no one will remember it, thankfully, because it happened today. But I didn't enjoy the rando sections as much as I did enjoy Harris or Dr. Jill Biden or Hillary Clinton or really there was a number of really good speeches that will stand in memory. None of them were the little hits by the random people. Except maybe the kid that stutters. And I know Corey's got strong feelings about that. So I'll throw it back.
A lot of, for those who didn't watch, the Biden talking to the everyman was a very strange Dr. Magneto sitting in like a swivel chair with like these vertical monitors of like people's faces on them as if he was like, judging them as his panel of advisors, and then he would of course turn to them and then they'd have nothing really inspirational to say because they were just regular people. So it kind of fell flat in that way. And also I don't think Biden was a great moderator. Corey, what was your takeaway? Production, content, the overall sort of sentiment and feeling. I know you had some advice last week about what to do, what not to do. How did it land for you?
Well, there were highlights and there were lowlights, and individual clips could be good. I think the way it hung together as a set was not particularly compelling to me. It was caught between two worlds, right? It had this clip show nature. It was like the most, how can I put this? Like, just imagine like the most basic Democrat bros YouTube, like autoplay list. Like it just cut from one thing to the next thing.
That's a good analogy.
Oh, yeah.
And the transitions was big on my list too. I wanted to mention it because everything hanged a little too long and then went to a smash cut. And you would have like this rising orchestral music, smash cut. All of a sudden the music's over and it's Julia Louis-Dreyfus sitting there with a joke in front of no audience, which didn't really land particularly well, right? And it really made me appreciate that there's an element to conventions that I think we took for granted, right? And that's dead air. So when you're watching one of the previous conventions on CNN or Fox News or MSNBC, they are filling the time in between with talking heads and they are providing a narrative. They're telling you the story of, and this all builds up toward this explains why this speaker is here. They're there to tell you that bit about Joe Biden's past and bring this component into it to bring it up later in the speech and make it all hang together in like a very nice package there. And we didn't really get that in the same way because it was produced and it kept moving. Yet it wasn't produced to the level of a full television show. So you had these big, sweeping, drone shots and rising music and, the stuff about Beau Biden was very moving, like legitimately well put together too. And then you would cut to, Cory Booker looking to all the world like an ass with like not a very good speech. And, sorry to Cory Booker. He has a great first name, but he had a bad speech tonight. And so there was that jarringness to it that was hard for me to overcome. It was but that said, there were highlights. I thought Tammy Duckworth was really good tonight. I thought the Beau Biden stuff, as I mentioned, really hit me. But there were a lot of lowlights, like the Joe interviewing union guys you were talking about. Oof.
Yeah.
Oof, that was tough. Equally tough, the Steph Curry stuff, which I saw a little bit of love for online. I thought that was brutal.
Yeah.
I thought that also, Joe, like, he plays for literally the worst team in the NBA now. Like, that was a few years ago. That would have been a cool get. And like, we all love Steph, but come on. Like,
stay in your lane, athletes. What are you guys doing? Come on.
They couldn't get any of the really good guys because they're still playing in the playoffs.
They're in the bubble. Thank you, Carter, for your sport comment.
Well, I'm very, as you know, very in tune with the NBA.
Corey, finish your thought there. Outside of railing on Cory Booker, what else did you want to add?
Well, from a content point of view, you did see the Democrats start to put the pieces on the table, their conversation. Yeah. I think people need to appreciate when something like this gets built, it is overthought by political consultants and strategists, and it is a bit of a Chekhov's gun thing. Like, if you see a speech, that speech is there for a reason. They think that's going to be an important component of telling an overall narrative that Joe Biden's going to refer back to and whatnot. And like, honestly, like, there was even sort of payoff on like Michelle Obama talking about how he helped a kid overcome his stutter, and then you see a kid who Joe Biden helped overcome the stutter on the last night. Like there was a narrative arc to that, even, right? And nobody sat there and pointed it out, but like, it's the way that they build in these components about his compassion and this, you know, the straits that America is in right now.
Well, also on that particular front, like, they wanted you to know that Joe Biden himself has a stutter. Right?
Yeah.
Like, that was the main purpose of it. No offense to the kid, but he was kind of a chess piece to let them know that Joe Biden also suffers from what I do.
Well, but it's like an overcoming thing, right? And it also speaks to his compassion, and the empathy was on tall display. Joe Biden had a stutter, you know. Joe Biden has lost family members. Joe Biden has not had an easy go here, and I mean, I won't step all over my thoughts on his address, but like, you know, the content was there. The production that tied it together, you know, it was not going to be easy for them to do. This is the first time they're doing it, but it was not.
It was not?
No, it was not there.
The production.
Yeah.
But it's not that dissimilar from like the Oscars or the Emmys or something like that, which often
this is what I
suffers
want to
from
talk about.
You know, it's the same disease, right? These are people that you know, producing a live event like this that flows, that doesn't have breaks. I mean, it's really tough. And
well, this is my point, Carter. Can I ask this question? Because you're about to go down a path that I like, because I want to talk about this. The three of us were kind of texting during this thing. All of us were confused as to what was actually live or not. Like, we didn't know if this union thing was live. It seemed like the speech was, but fuck if I actually know. Did they overthink? No, but did they overthink it for what they actually needed to make live? Because that would have put them in a really different production box. They could have actually made this and stitched it together in a much different way. Was there perhaps a little bit too much overthinking going on, being like, no, that has to be live? Like, for example, I just continue with your thoughts there.
Julia Louis-Dreyfus stuff was live. You know, I think that all that throwback to the host, if you will, and there was a couple of other hosting moments, and I think that was all live, and then they try and stitch it together live because somehow a live event is going to be better. I've yet to see a live event that is better than an actual produced event, with maybe the notable exception of sports, and sports is a different medium entirely because it can't be done like. Even then, they stitch together the pre-show in a way that it is live, but it's not really live. And the same with the halftime show. But the game itself, you're trapped in the game. But now they fixed the game to the live production as well, right? You got to have all those different timeouts and those types of things. You don't have any of that.
I'm going to disagree with you even on sports. Love sports, but you know what's better than sports? Sports movies.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I mean...
halftime shows suck. Waiting for the kick sucks. That stuff's not great.
There's only one thing left in the world that's better live, and that's this podcast. Which, by the way, we have one Patreon subscriber. It's $15,000. We'll fly you here. You quarantine for 14 days, and then you just get to sit in my basement and watch us live. And then you have to go and quarantine for 14 on the other side. Once the borders open, of course. Corey, I want to go down this track, though. This is interesting to me because Your comment from last time was really important, I think, which was the comment of they need to break the rules and not feel like they're stuck by any convention. And do you feel like one of the conventions they're stuck by is certain things have to be live? And do you feel like that was perhaps an overthink on their part? Same question I asked to Carter.
I do think it was an overthink, and it goes beyond just the notion that it needs to be live, but it was also, this is a convention, so we've got to have speeches from all of these different people in this format and all of that. And I thought that some of the speeches were fine, but some of the speeches really kind of slowed the whole thing down, hit a wall. Again, you would have these well-produced segments interspersed with these speeches, and the transition there was a bit jarring. If there was a value to that transition, I think it's that it would have seemed almost unbearably jarring if you went to the live speech by the presidential candidate at the end, and that was the only live component of it. That would have seemed very weird. So I think you did need to have a bit of live interspersed there, if only so that wasn't the only one and people weren't fixated on this is strange, this is different, it's live now. But that said, they had more rope than they played with, I guess is what I would say. I do believe that, even the roll call, which I thought was an interesting approach, how they had each state in these different areas, people speaking and then going to the next state and you'd have these nice visuals and it was all pre-recorded. Even that could have been cut so much faster. I mean, and people gushed about it, but I kept thinking, like, my comment about a lot of things hung for a couple of seconds too long comes directly from that segment. Yeah. It was like, okay, I've got it, Alabama, let's move on,
Yeah, I was really surprised, actually, that people gushed about it. And, people were saying they were in tears and things. And I was like, tears of boredom?
We're not Americans.
No,
we're not Americans. I mean, I'm sure it tugged at certain heartstrings if one of those states was yours, but...
Carter, I want to let you pretty long.
I want to let you finish off any thoughts you may have, because there was another sentiment you'd brought up, which was around, and I think you're telling us privately, small screen and big screen players, and fitting the screen and fitting the screen for the moment and having the speaker fit the screen. Can you maybe talk through that and see how that reconciled with what you saw in the convention?
Well, I think that this is actually one of the things you could see, like when Booker was doing his speech. I think that he's still a big arena speaker. He's got the ability to speak to that big arena and get them all excited. Biden's speech, though, and I won't go too deep into it, but I'll just talk about the performative element. He brought us along and was speaking to us as individuals, and perhaps the person who did it even better than Biden. Now, I'm not comparing this speech necessarily to Biden's speech, because I think Biden's speech was pretty spectacular, but Michelle Obama and her ability to bring people into her speech, like, I thought her speech was better than her husband's speech, markedly, because she was one of those people who understood the medium. She understood that she needed to be small. She needed to communicate using the television, using the internet. She needed to be able to communicate to each individual person who was listening. And that communication was absolutely there. And in fact, I think that people, if we're training our politicians in the future, will be able to pull at some of these speeches and say, this is a really good example of a stadium speech. And this is a really great example of a localized speech, because they were all there, right? Like, you're not going to say that Cory Booker can't speak. He can speak. He's just not as good, as Michelle Obama and Joe Biden, apparently, because Joe Biden, I think, reached in, grabbed us by the heartstrings and owned us tonight because of that ability to make it so small and personal. And that was small screen theater craft, frankly.
Corey, did you want to comment on that before we move on to the Biden speech?
No, I mean, I think that Carter gushing about the Biden speech is a little much, and maybe we can unpack that a bit. But there's no doubt that he did a really, really good job, and I'm sure we'll talk about that. But he's right. I mean, there are people who really play on a small screen, to use Carter's language, and people who play to a crowd. And actually, you mentioned Barack Obama's speech not being as good. That's because that man plays to a crowd.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
We talked about last time his ability to kind of rise his voice and do that rhetorical trick. Joe Biden's trick is now come closer. I want to get personal here. And I think
that
I gave him...
And then he shocks you by yelling at you at certain points. But yeah, that's kind of it. He lulls you in, and then he says, I will fucking protect you. You're like, okay, shit, I guess so. But go ahead, Court.
Well, my point was that in some ways it occurs to me that when Joe Biden is quieting down the crowd in an arena and he's trying to get that moment comes pre-baked. in a format like this, in a medium like this. So it may have played to his strengths, certainly more than I appreciated. But yeah.
Yeah, Corey, you're already on it. Let's talk about the Biden speech, right, Carter? So let's perhaps start here before we get into the cadence and the structure and the stagecraft. I want to talk about all of that because I think it's interesting and important. Let's talk about expectations. What did you think the expectations were heading into this? Because I think that's the starting point of perhaps how well you're gushing, others are perhaps gushing or criticizing. Wherever you stand, in your mind, where did expectations stand? How did the Dems do in terms of setting what Joe might say? And frankly, how did his principal opponent, Donald Trump, do in terms of perhaps lowering expectations for Biden?
Well, I mean, this is the expectation game is almost 80% of it now. And you're like, by setting him up as Sleepy Joe and, worrying about his mental health and whether or not he's even able to function, you're setting the bar extremely low. So when he hits it, even just a little bit, you're like, wow, he was way better than I expected. He has made a lot of gaffes. I mean, I don't want to just, sound like, Trump's completely off base by creating this unreasonably low expectation. The media had seen enough that they were willing to accept the narrative that Trump's campaign was putting forward, that, Sleepy Joe and not able to actually perform up to the task. And by buying into the narrative, by buying into the expectations game and wondering, will Joe be able to do this? It just set him up for tremendous success, because part of it was a really good speech. Part of that, I think we have to accept as a reality. That was just a really good speech. But because the expectations had been set so unbelievably low, he even came across better. And really the Trump campaign shot himself in the foot because they don't play politics in the same fashion. Everything's by, just trying to win the day. So there's never a setup beyond today. And that's where I think the Trump campaign really went wrong, is because they set themselves up where Biden, by doing this, has really destroyed a large part of their narrative about him being Sleepy Joe and not up for the task.
Corey, let's talk about expectations. Do you agree with what Carter said here?
Yeah, they set expectations very low. I think that's kind of a bug in one of many in Donald Trump's personality, is he can't help but be kind of this pugilistic guy who's going to give you the shitty nickname. But he may have done it a little too soon, because if everybody walked in there similar to, and I think we fell prey to this as well. And Stephen's right. Biden is a gaffe machine. Like, it's not unreasonable to think that he might have an awkward moment, but he is a good speaker. And he left there not looking like the caricature that Donald Trump had put out. Now, Donald Trump's got a speech coming up in a week here, right? It's quite possible that he will look like the caricature if he's not careful. So he, Joe Biden did a good job of kind of setting, like, he's going to be angry and this isn't America and all of this. But what he did not do is say that Donald Trump wouldn't be able to speak or whatnot. And I don't see the proxies out there doing that. And that's because they don't want to lower expectations. So I think the RNC may have hit that a little too hard. Talking about how bad he was, how not up to the job he was, because this was a pretty low bar to come over for a professional politician.
Yeah, and guys, I want to talk about a few elements, like I mentioned, about the speech. Let's start with stagecraft. Carter, let's talk about what you saw tonight with Biden and stagecraft, right? I think both of you last episode agreed that this can't be the convention speech. You can't give a convention speech where you're speaking to the same group. And I know, Corey, you thank you for putting your hand up and making sure that I tell people you had said that. Thank you. But this would have to be, what? Did you not just do that? Do you want to disagree with me there?
No, I was. Yeah. I said that it's gotta feel different, right?
It's gotta feel, and I think you said
more like
it's
an
gotta feel more
press.
Presidential, right? Conventional versus convention versus presidential, exactly. What did you think of the stagecraft, Carter? If you bought into that premise that this needed to be a more serious, somber speech, did you feel like the stagecraft matched the moment? The standing, the flags in the back, even how the camera was panned, not too close, as it were, a presidential address at a desk. I'm kind of curious about what you kind of made of how they produced that moment.
Well, I mean, there was a really interesting shot kind of in the middle of the speech when Biden came out and he was kind of being framed with the podium in. And that framing with the podium in was kind of a traditional framing. And then at one point the camera tightened as Biden was slowing his cadence and lowering his voice. That you mentioned this kind of, Zain, where he's kind of, come in and listen to me. Come listen to me. As
lulling you in almost. Yeah.
Right. And then it was tight through the moment when he's talking about Bo, and he can't help himself. I mean, it's absolutely authentic. He chokes up every time he's talking about Bo, and the camera's just tight and quiet and just stays on him. And you can't even see really, like, you can see pieces of the American flags, but really this is just, it's one man framed in that moment. And I think the only place that I took question with how the framing was done and how the cadence was done. So how he framed it, so the camera framing, the cadence of his voice, and then the explosiveness of the voice was at the end when he tried to create what I would call a false ending. He raised his voice up and he became harder in the moment. And it was designed, I think, because they can't help themselves. And that's how, speech writers think that maybe this is how a speech is supposed to end. I think it would have been more powerful even if you just kind of had dropped it off, not off an edge or anything like that, but just left it on that and just kind of finished it with a we'll do this together type of feel, as opposed to, and I'm the man to get us there. Cause that's really what the intonation and the strength of the speech was about, is you can trust me. I'm strong enough for this. But even that, I mean, I'm now nitpicking because, really they had me on the close up and, that tighter framing and the lowering of the voice. His cadence was unbelievable. The speech, like, he never spoke too fast, but he would always, he would vary his speaking pattern and just grab onto us. And again, it's very difficult to do that in this type of an environment. When you're doing that with an audience, you can actually see them responding. To do that, when you've just got the words flashing down in front of your teleprompter, that's really tricky. That takes, he's a pro. He did a really good job.
Corey, Carter's brought up the cadence, so let's talk about that as well, both stagecraft and cadence. What did you kind of make of what you visually saw, and then what did you kind of make of how that matched with what he was saying? Carter used this concept of intimacy, right? Like, it seemed like he was talking to you individually. Did you get that same sense from what you saw and what you heard?
Oh, there's no question, and it was obviously quite intentional, because that slow camera zoom, if you weren't paying attention, you might not have even noticed that the camera was pulling in on him, right? And that didn't happen in one moment, by the way. That happened over a few minutes in the speech. He pulled us in. He told this story about how we can trust him, and he made the moment very somber, which I think was appropriate both for the medium and the moment, right? So we were saying last week, it's got to feel like an Oval Office address. This felt like this felt like a good Oval Office address, right? He nailed the format. He found his Pearl Harbor. He has coronavirus. He talked about the economic collapse, this moment of racial disunity. In short, he has Trump. And so he was able to talk about this disaster that was happening to America and how America would get through it, and America was better than this. And I thought that the weakest moments of his speech were actually the policy forward components, like the Build Back Better stuff. Like, that's where his cadence and his tone sort of fell apart for me too. Cause it sounded like a guy who didn't really know what the hell he was talking about. He just sort of said like it was a good idea. And it's my only real critique of the speech. Cause he's like, and we'll get these green jobs. It'll be great and everything will work. And
it's almost like he was told that, like, partially because it's a lot of the policy that he's proposing in his book is a little bit of a detour, is not entirely his, right? It's part of that compromise job that he's had to do with some of these other parties that have, not the parties, capital P, but like some of the Bernie supporters, Warren supporters, et cetera, to hash this out in a meaningful way. But go ahead, Corey.
Yeah, but the way he modulates his tone, and what a pro. My other critique is really minor, and it's more to do with what do you do now and how do you go forward? I wish he paused more between sections, because this, I think, is going to be a hard speech to unbundle, because as soon as he ended one section, he kept talking right away. And I pity the poor editor who's got to make that look nice and natural. I also think it would have been effective from a rhetorical point of view, just to make us sit and think about what he just said for a moment, because he moved very quickly between sections.
Yeah, but let me offer the converse on that. I mean, if it was one beat too long, they would have said that he was he was stumbling, he was having a difficult time through it. So, I don't disagree that a little bit of pausing in between the sections would have been very helpful, but it's a very tiny needle to thread, because I think that you very easily could have seen a critique that, he stumbled through the sections if he went one or two beats too long.
Yeah, I also, my other, I guess, minor critique is that he laid on a little thick. Like when he's saying, like, and my dad says to me, Joey, I don't expect the government to solve our problems, but I expect them to understand them. Really? Did Joe Biden Sr. really say that to Joe Biden Jr. at the ripe age of 8 or whatever?
Yeah.
Like, that was a little much for me. And it was really politician of times past. I think he could have done without it.
You know what, though? I was buying what he was selling. He could have told me. I was sitting on his knee listening to the stories the grandpa was telling.
This is interesting, right, Carter? You're not an easy audience, right? Like
I hate these things.
You professionally do this stuff. This is fascinating to me that you're actually sold. Why were you sold? Like, give me what was the cocktail of things that got you sold?
Well, let me preface it by telling you that I was dreading watching it. Right.
Yeah,
like I was absolutely so when I'm working with a candidate and they do a speech, I leave the hall. I can't stand watching them because they're going to fuck it up in some fashion. And I know what, and so I just leave. Right. What's the point? And then I spin that it was the best speech I ever saw. But I thought, for the podcast, I better actually, watch the speech and, I'll take notes and whatever. I was captivated. I didn't even take notes. I was watching it and listening to him, what he was saying. And, I get distracted very easily. I don't like these things at all. And I was totally enraptured by him and where he was taking me on his story. And that is, I know most people won't understand. Like, I just don't do this. I don't offer praise for speeches. I've seen maybe 2 speeches that I've really bought into. One was Obama and one's Biden. Although Clinton's also very solid.
You mean from this week or from a convention?
No, I'm talking about period in general. I just don't like them. And I feel like the average State of the Union has me smashing my head against a wall because they're so dense and, difficult to get through. Mm-hmm. This was story time with Joe, and story time with Joe is very entertaining, very entertaining.
Interesting. So the story element, the fact that, this was, Corey, any reaction to what Carter just said?
I mean, it was well done, and it was a very watchable speech. And I think that's a good thing, because not everything in the lead up to the speech was that watchable. So, if you were an American tuning in and thinking, do I want to check this out? I'm glad that he captured early for his own sake, because otherwise I think there was a risk that people would just say, I don't want to watch this. The Democrats were funny because they had this basic format to every speech. I think tonight for sure, but even the nights before that, from the highlights I watched, in full confession, this is the only night I watched the full stuff. I watched highlight videos before. It was like, my story includes touching healthcare event, union roots, military service, and now I'd like to talk to you about climate change. Like, that was every speech. And Joe Biden's wasn't an awful lot different. And
do you feel like that was deliberate, Corey?
Oh, I do. Yeah. I think, like I said, they think very carefully about all of these things and what they're trying to say and how they're putting it forward. And that's probably a message that they say, okay, that plays for our base and that plays for the center, and let's go with it. But the whole thing that he pulled in, I was just like, holy cow, it was quite well done. The other thing we haven't talked about is the lighting and the makeup.
Yeah.
It's like 20 years off the dude. He looks much younger there than he did even in the immediately following shots of him walking through the arena, I guess you'd call it, or the convention center to go inside.
I want to talk about one final element of stagecraft, because we've covered both cadence and stagecraft. But, this speech, unlike a convention speech, didn't have cutaways. You can't cut away to the single person in the crowd just like tearing. You can't cut away to the person that was referenced, for example, in the speech and find them somewhere in the stands. So, to make it entertaining and captivating, I think it's quite the accomplishment that Biden had to deliver the straight goods for the 20 minutes. With that being said, as guys who've, prepared candidates, prepared videos, done this sort of stuff on the political and communication side, would you have experimented with different type of cutaways? Would you have tried different things? Or did this have to be straight to camera, on screen, presidential serious? I'm sorry if I'm digging into this too much. I just think this is such a fascinating moment because we get such a unique experiment. But Corey, you want to jump in first?
Well, I'm sure they did experiment for starters, and I would not have done it because the few times they did that in other settings, even at the end of the speech where they showed people on the screens and they're waving at the screens, that was
a bunch of people, once again, vertical monitors on Zoom calls, just clapping. And the best part of that was the sign language interpreter who was also clapping.
How much of that do you even think was like real applause sound? Like,
I have no idea.
It's probably piped in, but like that. That was weird, and also they had like the little D logo until the Zoom screen came on, for the Democrats, and it felt like some of them didn't come on quite right, and I think they made the right call, and it makes me wonder if that wouldn't have worked in other situations. Necessity is the mother of invention, but the way they kept it on him and it pulled in close, very powerful, and maybe they're stepping on themselves in other settings when they're cutting to those audience reactions.
Carter, you want to add to that?
This is part of my everyman problem. You cut to the audience, and generally speaking, the audience doesn't offer anything. Like, they're not giving you anything to it. I mean, you jump to the audience and they give you some sort of applause. But again, if we liken it to the live sporting event, you jump to the audience when you're trying to fill time. You're not trying to fill time here. Like, this isn't a kiss cam. You're not jumping to the audience so that you can get them to give each other a schmoochie.
Which, by the way,
the DNC kiss cam would be something else.
I know. That's what I was just thinking.
No, but
go ahead, Carter.
By keeping it on the principle, we knew exactly who was in charge. We knew what was important. Corey's point, when they came out and they jumped to the drive-in movie theater that was watching the fireworks.
Yeah.
And they jumped to the audience, and the audience is lacklusterly holding up a Biden sign, riding with Biden. And you're like, oh, that's just sad. It's just sad because it's deflating a moment. The moment was there. If they had a proper transition to those fireworks, that could have been massive. But
like
didn't.
The energy level of the audience outside was like a bunch of people who like just won a sporting championship, but it's like all the true fans couldn't show up. So it's the people who got free tickets were like, okay, now we need to go like celebrate on the streets. It was that level of energy.
Imagine how it goes.
Polite clapping while they're like standing on a roof of a truck.
I mean, if immediately Dr. Biden came out and gave him a hug, and then out comes the Harris family, and they're all excited, and then immediately you switch to the fireworks starting to go off, while those two candidates and their families go out to the fireworks, and then you cut to Joe and Kamala out there with the fireworks going on. Like, that's a transition, and I think that the difference between like really television production is all about transitions. It's really less about, there's scripting and but the DNC and the people who put this together understand how to do speech scripting. They didn't understand how to do transition scripting. And that's, I think, where they're weak right now. But man, gosh, that'll come.
Corey, let's talk
this every time. We should never go back to an actual convention.
It could be interesting. Corey, let's talk about content and structure, right? Yeah. So I think the structure, the lightness for the light versus darkness, I think was the main narrative sort of bookend that we saw. But what did you kind of make from what he was saying? Both, you said the policy in your mind was kind of the weakest part where he kind of laundry listed it. But what did you make of the overall sort of content and structure and the framing?
Well, it was also buried in the middle. I've been thinking since that ended, and we're recording at 12:47 Eastern, right?
Yeah.
So it's not so long after the convention speech even ended. I've been wondering, a week from now, what do you remember from that speech? And I actually don't know that it's any of the content, Zane. I think it's more the feeling, but it's a feeling built on the content they provided. And there was a real clear arc that he took us through there. He started with talking about the problems that America is facing, this moment, that is unlike any other moment before, and the president that's not up to that task. He took it through, his story, like the bridge to and hey, people are losing family because of coronavirus. And I know what that's like to lose family, right? And it allowed him to bridge to his empathy and talk about his overall approach to governing and compare that contrast too. There was I couldn't even tell you how the policy was shoehorned in, which I think is part of my problem with it. But, he kind of charted a path, and he said, this is how it would be different under him, and this is what you could expect under him. And while he didn't shy away from talking about Trump, he didn't make it so much about Trump. Everybody knows Trump, right? Everybody's got an opinion on Trump. He really did take it as an opportunity to talk about Joe Biden. And I do think people are going to be talking about Joe Biden's empathy. They might not use the word empathy, but they're going to be talking about how much he cares. Even when you think about the convention writ large, and I don't think this was necessarily calculating. I actually don't think it's calculating, but maybe I'm just being too naive at this point. But the amount of content about Beau Biden, and it wasn't about Joe Biden being the father of Beau Biden. It was about Beau Biden. It was almost as if Joe was saying, if I'm getting the stage right now, I'm giving some limelight to my deceased son. And it speaks so much of his character and who he is and what he really wants. And I think that's a good feeling to have voters left with. I think that was really smart. That was really savvy of them. Now, I will say some of the specifics, if we remember them, they could get him into a bit of trouble. He made a very definitive statement about COVID. No miracle is coming, right? No miracle is coming on COVID. And then he started talking about things he was going to do in February. That's depressing. I just, just what a downer, even if it's true. But B, maybe, science is a modern miracle, and maybe we will have a vaccine by then. It's certainly not inconceivable, and that's not wishful thinking. That's what scientists are saying, quite possible by the end of the year. And I worry that if Trump somehow rushes out a vaccine or gets lucky, that could come back to bite Biden, right? Hey, it's October. The government is starting to release vaccines. And by the way, here's an ad of Biden saying that was never going to happen. These Democrats are cynics. They want America to fail. In general, I always encourage people to stay away from definitive statements. And he had a couple of definitive statements in there.
Yeah, Carter, good take, Corey. Carter, any comments on content or structure from what you saw?
Well, I want to talk a little bit about what Corey's brought up a couple times, and that's the policy that was within the speech. It was very interesting to me that the entire convention, the people who actually carried the policy were the kind of more the failed candidates, and they were carrying the policy to their specific audiences. Even kind of like the Republican, the Republicans coming over to try and win over their cohort to come and vote for Joe. They were the carriers of the true policy, and Joe was the carrier of the story. Joe was the carrier of the, building a narrative for himself that creates him, is the super everyman, I think is how I want to now characterize him, right? He's just, he's average Joe coming from Scranton, and, his dad lost his job and all these types of things. But at the same time, you get the real sense that this is a man who could actually do stuff. He just didn't talk about it. He didn't talk about what he was going to do. He allowed that water to be carried by others. And I thought that was actually pretty effective. I think that maybe Corey and I disagree a little bit on that. I didn't need to hear the policies, because I'd heard them for 3 days straight. I needed to, I was pretty comfortable just hearing the story that Joe was bringing.
I don't think we're disagreeing. I don't think we're disagreeing. I think that the policy was the weakest part, and he should have had less policy, not more.
Oh, okay. Well, then we're agreeing. Well, that's good.
Yeah.
We should never do that again. It's very awkward.
Deeply concerning.
Yeah.
And really, I think this is, it feels like this is really being set up to be quite the character election, right? That, we sometimes talk about policy elections. We sometimes talk about character elections. This feels like a character election. You can't say a speech with no policy. People would say it was bereft of policy then. So maybe he was just checking that box and running through it as fast as he could. And sure.
Let's talk about strategy for a second, right? So I think you guys have told me through each of the sections we went through what you would have done differently on stagecraft and content and structure. Anything else to round that out before we kind of go about what would you have done differently? Carter, is there anything you wanted to throw in before we move on?
No, I think we got it.
Corey?
No, I think the Democrats had a really tough challenge. And the one thing I will say, and I might be stepping on a later segment of yours, is talk about an advantage that the Republicans get by going second in a situation like this. It's not really like in years past where you're just iterating on the most recent convention. They get to watch everything that worked and everything that didn't at the DNC. And if they're smart, they will double down on what works. And if they're smart, they will just drop what does not. And they've got a real tactical advantage now.
Let's talk about this. Let's talk about the Republicans. You've brought it up. Carter, what do you suggest right now? Let's talk about the Republicans in two formats. The first one, immediately, today, right? You see the Biden speech comes out. What do you do from a digital perspective, from a rapid response perspective? And then let's go into what Corey was talking about, which is what does their convention strategy now alter or look like? So let's start with rapid response first. What are you thinking?
Well, I think that you're going to go to your people and say that he sucked because none of them watched it. Right. The people who watched this were the pundits, the media, maybe some independents and absolutely the Democrats. But it's not like you're seeing, so package it up, show minor flaws that he made. He had a few,
slip
ups in the speech, like that were absolutely minor and absolutely inconsequential. Make them consequential, dig in and try and make them so that he actually looks like he is Sleepy Joe, and just keep with your branding. Lord knows you're not going to stop lying now. So you may as well just jump in and follow it all the way to the end. In terms of what happens next week for them, so you're going to spend the next 72 hours saying how bad Joe was, and how he's not up for leading and how weak he sounded. Oh my God, all he did was talk about his dead son. There are things that they can do because, they will. But the Democrats put on a pretty decent digital convention. And maybe if I'm the convention organizer for the Republicans, I'm not sleeping much over the next 72 hours, making sure that everything is run. I would probably start shifting things away from live, and I would just nail down the production. And I'd be putting an A, B, and C team together to make sure that all the all of the production is done as quickly as possible. Even if they're doing live to tape 45 minutes before the show, just doing something to make sure that they're not going to see a major gaffe, because now a major gaffe is going to totally stand out compared to the Democratic convention.
Corey, what do you do in short terms? Let's talk about rapid response. You give me some of your thoughts on long term. Rapid response, what are you thinking?
Well, boy, that speech, Joe Biden sure hates America. And look at that policy, totally co-opted by the left of his party. If Joe Biden had his way, every city, every small town in America would look like the riots in Portland, the riots in New York City, the riots that are occurring in all of these Democratic rotten boroughs across the country. And, I would just sort of keep hitting those notes. The odds are good. Most of Trump's base will not have watched the Joe Biden speech. And if you get people thinking, like I actually don't know that you can to cut those clips out of context. I mean, you can, sure, do it towards your base. They'll lap it up. They'll look at his few pauses and his few stutters and say, what a sleepy clown, right? Because they're pre-programmed to do that. But even talking about his stutters so much during DNC is a bit of an inoculation against that. So the next time Donald Trump goes out and cuts an ad that shows Biden pausing for a bit, and the next time, like normal people, I'm not talking the base now, I'm talking like more moderate, persuadable people, somebody shit talks Joe Biden for that, they're going to get slapped down by someone who says, well, he had a terrible stutter as a child and he's overcome it, right? Yeah. And so it was a bit of security there. So I don't think I would lean in on that. I would just say, previous candidates would have been embarrassed by the content of that speech. Joe Biden railed against this, great republic we have and was so deeply negative. And look at that policy. That's not America. I mean, that's what you do. And you just don't talk about it for very long, because why would you want to talk about Joe Biden's speech for longer than you have to?
Corey, let's get some of your expanded thoughts on their convention. You said they're lucky to go second, right? As the Republicans, are you, like Carter's point, not sleeping a lot if you're organizing the Republican convention right now? Are you perhaps shifting strategy, taking lessons from what you've seen? Because I think their tactics a little different with Trump going to be in that convention space, if I'm not mistaken. Correct me if I'm wrong, but what are you thinking of doing if you're taking lessons and crib notes from what you saw tonight?
Well, he's going to be in Washington, D.C., in all likelihood. That's not necessarily 100% firmed up, at least as of when we went to record here.
Yeah.
But the idea would be that he give his big speech from the White House, from the White House lawn, and Melania give her speech there, and that a lot of the convention events and convention speakers are in D.C., even though the convention itself is not officially in D.C., right? So he's not necessarily going to have the big crowds, but they're certainly talking about having crowds, right? Like groups of people, more applause sounds. That may work. I got to say, like when I watched the clips of Joe Biden speaking in front of crowds and, the crowds cheering and whatnot, they reminded me of what we lost, some of that energy. And of course, those were interspersed between some of the weaker DNC speakers, as well. So I can see them wanting to bring back that energy. It doesn't take a huge number of people to sound like a loud crowd as long as they're all into it. And I think if I'm the Republican planners of this convention, I'm never sleeping because, of course, I've made a deal with Satan. That's in theory what you would do. But I'm sure they're looking at certain pieces and say, no, screw that. We're not going to do that. Now, if they're really smart and really bold, and I actually think with their digital chops they might be, frankly, is they'll just say, some of these pieces are so traditional and so expected, but we're not going to do them. Screw it. Throw out the rundown, right? Like, we're not going to have these random speeches by every single senator in the world and every single, we're just going to do the things that are going to be great on television. And I bet you that's a terrible job, because I'll bet you Donald Trump thinks he knows a lot about what plays in that medium based on his background.
Last thing I want to talk about before we move it on is what's the Democrats doing right now? So, like, you had a good night with your main guy. You locked down 4 days. How are you distilling and distributing? Because we just talked about the fact that only your base has been watching this. What is your distillation and distribution strategy? And maybe, Corey, I can start with you on this. Is what elements are you taking? What are you punting out? And perhaps where? What's the best tool to make the case for the people who just weren't tuning in the middle of the summer right now?
Well, I think you're going to want a combination of clips of the convention that you can repackage, and maybe even clips of the speech. But then you're also going to want to have the ability to push the narrative that Joe Biden won, right? Like that it was a great speech and that it's worth going in, because people might be more willing to digest the analysis than they are the product. And if you can sort of get out there that roundly this was viewed as a really good speech, it really reinforced these positives about Joe Biden. Certainly it blew everybody's expectations out of the water. That's many people will just stop there and say, I guess Joe Biden had a great week. I guess he's not Sleepy Joe. But some people will then go further and look at the product to see that. And I don't think it hurts you to have people see that product at all. Sometimes it's a bad speech and you claim you won, but you want to be careful because you don't actually want people to watch the speech. That's not one of these situations.
Carter, what are you thinking of what Corey said? What's your distill and distribute strategy?
Well, what I would do right now is the DNC is saying that they had the biggest single day of fundraising they've had so far in the campaign today. I would take all of that money, all the money that was raised in the last 72 hours, and I would buy every digital property I could get over the next 7 days. And I would ramp it up so that, like, for example, the granddaughters piece, that was fantastic. I'd run that every opportunity I could, because that's a humanizing moment. And I would just keep going with, Biden is a human. I don't know what Trump is. Like, that is a really easy, juxtaposition that they can just buy. They can buy this on digital and buy it in Facebook. All of this is Facebook friendly. Get it out there. and just buy the hell out of it, because what you don't want to have happen is any real momentum loss in the next 7 days. Because if the momentum of today was to carry through to the election, you're doing great. The only thing that can, losing that through the convention of the RNC is going to be a real problem. So my thinking is just, Trump did it to you. Let's do it to him. Let's buy as much digital as we can during the RNC.
Okay, let's move it on to our next segment, overrated and underrated. Guys, are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Corey, I'm going to start with you. Overrated or underrated? Celebrity endorsements. We saw a lot of them in this convention. We saw Steph Curry, you mentioned, but there's musicians, Billie Eilish, all these other folks coming in, endorsing. Julie Louis-Dreyfus was actually hosting and not just implicitly, but explicitly endorsing. Overrated, underrated? What do you think?
So overrated. And I think, in fact, kind of plays into this caricature of the Democratic Party. I don't, Billie Eilish, amazing artist. Don't know why we need to hear her view on politics at all. Don't know why we need to hear Steph Curry's view on politics. He's welcome to have it. I just don't know why he gets that piece in the DNC. That to me is like, I'm not saying these people shouldn't have a voice. I'm saying, is this like the DNC is where you want to give the voice? I mean, it's not the everyman. It's not, hey, I can be that. And it's not the political experts. And I'm just curious if anybody's ever changed their vote. If you're out there and you've changed your vote because of a celebrity endorsement or know someone who has, please let me know.
Carter, overrated, underrated, celebrity endorsements.
It's totally overrated because it's not transferable. The star power doesn't transfer. Taylor Swift tweeting and talking about politics for the first time in her career isn't bringing all the Swifties out. They're not getting there. Today's pieces, I mean, I get having Julia Louis-Dreyfus as the host. That makes sense to me because she's a performer and she moves things from A to B. So I can see that. But the Steph Curry stuff, I also can see the chicks, singing the national anthem. I think that's fine. That is what they do. But Steph Curry and some of the other celebrity endorsements were absolutely painful.
Corey, next one back to you. Overrated or underrated introductory videos at conventions. These are the set pieces that are like trailers for what you're about to hear, but said by the person rather than other people. What do you think? Introductory videos, overrated or underrated?
That's great. I'm going to say underrated because I don't really think about them very much, but they are so essential for setting that stage and defining who's to come. There's that old thing about, PR is when somebody else talks about how great you are, and it's an opportunity to be more boastful before the candidate goes on and basically makes the same pitch in a humble sense. That's a really interesting thing. I have not thought much about them, and so yeah, underrated.
Carter, what do you think?
Underrated. They are really good. Oh yeah. I mean, I've produced quite a few of them, and you get to do things in that video that you can't do in the speech. So they are really, really solid, and even the introductions can't do it. But the speed, it sets the entire tone when it's done properly. And I would refer to two of the introductory videos that really set tones. And possibly, here's me going on a limb. The Dr. Jill Biden introductory video was the stronger of the two introductory videos that they've had. If you haven't gone and watched, watch it. It is fantastic. And it sets you up with, she's a superhero. And you're like, oh my God, I love what the story is. And the story it told I don't know if it was 4 or 5 minutes long. But it told a really wonderful story. And then, she was okay as a speaker, but that introductory video was fantastic. So I'd go with underrated.
I was expecting completely different responses for both of those questions from you guys. So you guys have, I don't know if pleasantly surprised me, but certainly surprised me. And I'll go to the last one. Carter, I'm going to you again on this one. Overrated or underrated? When we zoom out from all of this, convention speeches. Overrated or underrated? We talked ad nauseum right now about every element of the Joe Biden speech, but when we zoom out from this, will it be something that we're given too much credence to or not enough credence to? What do you think?
How about if it's underrated if they're really good and overrated when they bomb? Because, this is a really good speech, and I do think it will have more impact than over the next few weeks, and it will set Joe up for the fall and into the election. So I think that from that point of view, it is underrated. But on the other hand, some speeches, like, we're not going to be remembering 80% of those speeches, 90% of the speeches that were at the convention. So maybe the final one, and, like the Barack Obama speech that put him on the stage in, was it 2004? That everybody kind of went, oh my God, there's a guy named Barack Obama and he's a star. Every once in a while, those types of things happen. I'm not sure that happened this time. From that point of view, I mean, there is a degree of overrating.
Corey, same question to you. When we zoom out from all of this, the convention speeches, overrated or underrated?
You're talking about all convention speeches, or just the big one there?
Give me the big one. Give me the big one we spend most of our time on. The convention speech, singular, yeah.
Yeah, convention speech, singular. I think they're rated about right. It's the same as I said last week. They are not something that everybody tunes into, but enough do. And I think I have a better sense of what Joe Biden's message will be going throughout the fall. They're the big part of the big event. They are the starting pistol. And it's certainly now a little more clear to me what the Biden message will be, because they've put so much effort into constructing this, and then the way they concluded with the speech tells you everything you need to know about what Joe Biden's going to be saying over the next few months. Every other speech, I would say overrated. Like, they're not most people's star turn, but this, the end speech is pretty important.
That's it. We'll leave it right there. That is You the People for this week. We're now, of course, headed to Harvey's and Swiss Chalet, respectively, but we will see you next time. And looking forward to covering the Republican National Convention. See you all next time.